Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Our discussion today is going to get started. Interestingly, Blessing is here to also complement this conversation. I wanted to say the lady in red. Blessing, good morning. How are you today?
Hi, good morning, Femi.
You see, your glasses makes you look like one professor.
Yeah, that's our shipping policy.
Oh, great. Professor of
Policy.
How was your weekend?
Well, the weekend is good. The good news is that we're here to continue what we started.
Yeah, it's always a productive time, when you start a new week like this. The good news, the arrangement being made as regards petrol. Before now, NNPC used to be the sole supplier of petrol in Nigeria. So that monopoly is going to be broken now with this arrangement that is going to be made where independent marketers can now approach Dangote. And I learned there's going to be a meeting now where there's going to be a discussion as regards the price of petrol and how that's going to help to crash the price of petrol because Nigerians are really feeling the pain.
Well, Femi, the thing is, sometimes this back and forth with the Dangote refinery supplying petrol to marketers, to the NPC, sometimes one doesn't want to talk about it because it seems like, hey, what is really going on here? There's been too much back and forth. But we just hope, for the sake of many Nigerians, for our sakes as well, that this whole thing is sorted.
Yeah.
And then there's fuel available at the filling stations and it's affordable. That's another thing. It's affordable. But if it's about independent marketers sourcing themselves directly from Dangote refinery, what difference does that really make? Because the independent marketers have been sourcing from other refineries abroad. So I don't think it's going to make much difference.
Maybe on the part of the marketers now, the pressure of FX, sourcing for FX to purchase, that's going to reduce
refineries abroad.
Yeah,
well.
so they can do what we call Naira exchange instead of the headache of looking for Forex, to buy petrol. Then the good thing is the cost of, purchase or lifting will also be reduced because it's
landing cost.
That the landing cost, yeah, that's the right.
It's out of it.
Yeah. So it's out of it, or it could be cheaper because this is done locally. And then it bothers me if you have that kind of refinery here in Nigeria, and we still want to import. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day.
Yes, if we still want to import, it depends on what is coming from the Dangote refinery. Would it be sufficient to satisfy the Nigerian market?
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about 650,000 barrels per day. We can't consume that in Nigeria.
Again, I think Nigerians should determine whether or not, or the independent marketers should determine whether they want to source solely from Dangote refineries, or some would say they could get it cheaper as well. So if it's something that it has to be Dangote refinery alone, then that's another spending of monopoly. But when you give the independent marketers the choice to determine where they will get it from, I think it brings in some competition, which we are looking forward to. And that's the only way there could be that reduction in price,
You're doing well.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's get back to our big story for today, which is to look at the role or the importance of foreign exchange intervention when it comes to nations navigating economic shocks. We're making reference to a report released by IMF recently, where IMF has emphasized the need for forex exchange or foreign exchange intervention. I don't know why I'm saying forex here, but here it is.
It seems like you have some in your pockets or in your bank, some landed in your bank. You should tell me the truth.
There's always need for money.
We're partners.
There's always need for money, but here we're talking about foreign exchange, system, which will also take us to look at the foreign exchange system in Nigeria and at what point will be the necessary for the monetary authority to intervene. Let's seek the opinion of our guest who joins us virtually. We're being joined by the CEO of Finance with Muktar. He's a financial expert. We have the pleasure of hosting once again this morning, Muktar Mohammed. Glad you have you join us this morning. How are you today? And good to see you.
Thank you so much for always having me. Always a pleasure to be on your programs. Good morning, Blessing.
When you see Muktar, at the table, having this kind of conversation with you, you're always confident that, yes, you get the right analysis, you get the right thought as regards this discussion. And that's the way I feel this morning. So glad you have joined us once again. Let's start with
Thank you for the
your
kind
quick
words.
reaction to this kind of report. You know, you have the IMF stating the importance of foreign exchange intervention for economies to be able to navigate shocks. Now, my question is, how do you react to these, and at what point would it be necessary to have intervention from monetary authorities when it comes to the issue of foreign exchange? Give us an idea.
Okay, I think finally the IMF is saying something, then sometime it tells the other country to do something different. Foreign exchange intervention, it depends on where the IMF is taking it from. Is it that intervention in terms of making it available through trade, or is it intervention in terms of right pricing of it? So that is the questions we need to ask the IMF. Foreign exchange intervention in any economy globally now seems to be between the naira, okay, Nigeria, the naira and the dollar, and globally every other currency with the dollar, because the dollar seems to be the global currency. So when you talk about foreign exchange intervention, you are asking how much of this dollar do you have in your foreign reserve as a national, as a country? And what it means is that because most of countries do a lot of trading with the United States and have their foreign reserve in US dollars. So that's why they tend to accept any mode of payment globally is only in the US dollar that you're expected to pay when you buy goods in Hong Kong, or when you buy goods even in China. They take it, but if you go there to bring your own currency, it's not accepted. So most most country has their foreign reserve in currency in the US dollar, even including China, India, most developing nations. So that's where it comes. In terms of intervention, intervention has to do with what do you think is the exchange rate between your currency and that of the US dollar. I think that is where the challenge has always been, because sometimes this currency intervention value is depending on the volume of trade you do with either the United States or other country of the world. If you're doing a lot of trading between you and maybe your country and other countries, then you can see that your currency will maintain a little bit of stability. But when you are the one depending on them and your volume of trade is low, then that's where the challenge comes. And that has been the challenge for developing economies, especially African nations, because the challenge of currency volatility via trade. So that for me is the main issue that we say. So how much of trade do you do with the United States, or how much of trade do you do with China, or how much of trade do you do with other countries that involve the exchange between your currency and the dollar? And if it is the dollar, what is the true value of your currency via the dollar? That is only determined by your volume of trade. And sometimes that volume of trade is largely dependent of how much of this good you can export to earn that FX. That would definitely give you the true value of your currency.
Right. If we look at what the IMF is saying regarding foreign exchange intervention, it's saying that when it is determined that foreign exchange intervention is necessary, it should be integrated alongside other tools. It should be a combined policy approach that integrates other macro and financial tools. Now, what does that exactly mean? Given the Nigerian context, what we've seen the CBN do to create some somewhat firm buffer for the naira as against the dollar. What would that mean? Applying what the IMF is recommending.
I think when you are talking of policy in terms of synergy between policies to make to synergy between your intervention. So sometimes this policy they are talking about is all about what is your micro economy policy, especially in the area of inflation. And like I said again, it also has to depend on how much of imported goods do you depend on. And then when you talk about policy, then you have to look at what is the tariff on some of these goods that comes in, and what is the medium of payment of this tariff. And again, if you are importing a lot of goods, what is the means of payment? Is it being paid through the US dollar, or do you have to use your own local currency? Those are policies. If you come by and buy Nigeria, remember that the president said that we'll make sure that we start having stability in the exchange rate. Then there will be removal of tariff for household food items, so that would drive down inflation. And then again, they came up with a policy that says Dangote can also buy refined petroleum product using naira instead of dollar, but the exchange, the determined rate will be fixed, and that means that the dollar is still there, but this time, instead of using the dollar to as a means of payment, you use the naira to pay, but by the exchange rate of the dollar. So those are policies that create that can help in intervention in one way or the other, rather than the kind of direct intervention that we'll see sometime by the CBN, whereby they sell dollars to build the change. That also is acceptable. What they always say is that in terms of intervention like that, the intervention should be in critical sector of your economy, not just intervening because you want to maintain market stability. Then you're using all your efforts to make sure you maintain stability, and then your reserve is depreciating by the day, like what we have seen the CBN done over the years. Even if this current CBN management also are doing the same thing, but not in the magnitude of what we usually see before. So those are type of policies that they are trying to say. But the good thing about such policies is that you must make sure that those policies synergize with what is your overall long-term projection for your economy. A situation whereby there's no synergy between the monetary policy and the fiscal policy, then you create imbalance, and that imbalance is what normally results to what you call volatility. And then when you talk about middlemen taking advantage of it, whether you call it market forces or you call it middlemen, whichever one, but some of these things happen because there's no synergy between the monetary and the physical side.
All right, I would like to quote the IMF here, and I would like you to react to this statement stating that the report has acknowledged that fully flexible exchange rates may not always perform well, especially when economies are more exposed to shocks. It's talking about the fully flexible exchange rate. Now, you observe that monetary authorities globally, they use different exchange rate systems. Some will do floating of the FX, some will do control, intervention, or they will marry the two. But here, the IMF is stating that to have fully flexible exchange rates may not always perform well. How do you react to that?
You see, sometimes I think that's what we've been craving for a long time. We have been saying that going through IMF policy is not the solution to Nigerian problem. And finally, the IMF is saying that creating policy flexible exchange rate is not the solution, definitely. But again, it depends on your economy policy, because sometimes the IMF policy don't seem to favor some countries and favor some other countries. When you look at international market, they want to have not so much of, they want two things they look out for foreign investors, both direct or portfolio investors, to come to your market. True value of your exchange rate, that is one. Now, what I mean by true value of the exchange is stability in your exchange rate. That is one. Then secondly, they also need a two-way exchange system that is very stable. What I mean by two-way exchange system is I come in at this rate, I will exit at this rate. And also they need also for a market determined exchange rate, rather than whether you call it float exchange rate or managed exchange rate, whichever of them you decide to do, but they are always more interested in whether it is market driven. And sometimes the challenge we have is that sometimes people think that you could just leave your exchange rate to market forces. You just allow it to float. You just allow it to that flexibility. No, that's not true. Every global economy in the world has a particular time that they need to intervene. They need to bring stability to the market, especially when there's shortfall in supply. So flexible exchange rate is not the challenge, is not what any economy will really want. Flexible exchange rate means that today is this, tomorrow is this. You can no, they want a fixed exchange rate, but that fixed exchange rate must be market determined rate. It must not be a rate that is fixed by the government, that is managed by the government or managed by the government. Yeah, floating in the sense that when you talk about floating of your currency, you're talking about floating your currency at the true value. And that is where intervention comes, because immediately your currency is going below its value, you need to intervene to bring it to those values. So those are how you manage your currency. But again, let me give you an example. If you look at China, if China decide to devalue their currency, and America shiver. And what that means is that China goods are cheaper in the international market than American goods. So, and then you see America begin to think of intervening in that space. So those are the challenges that we see. But flexible exchange rate is not good for any economy. But what we need is market determined exchange rate that is determined by market forces. And this exchange rate is the true value. Now, that is the challenge with Nigeria, the true value. And how do you take your true value of your exchange rate? You look at your medium, in terms of your imports, your exported goods, how much of this effect did it bring into your economy via and by your GDP? That for me is the greatest challenge for most developing nations of the world.
If you look at the current policy of the CBN trying to automate the forex market, now how would that help in trying to in being able to determine the demand and the actual price of the forex?
Listen, I think the best thing the CBN has done is that globally, if you go to any economy in the world, and when you get to their country, you don't have to be calling somebody to know what the exchange rate is. You just go into the system, and then you see there that this is what is changed. If you have in dollar, this is the exchange rate of dollar to this and that and that. But in Nigeria, here, you have to call somebody. He tells you, "Oh, let me call Malam. Let me do this. Let me do that. Let me go to one side. Let me go to Aboki FX. Let me go to so many places they will just be calling for them to go and change, to go and check what the rate is like. So that for me is a big challenge for most Nigerians. I mean, for Nigeria, it's so that will help bring stability in terms of market stability. And that also will help bring control. What I mean by control is that you know who is involved in this trading compared to where people are trading behind the scene. They will still be behind the scene trading, but it would not be as distortion like what we normally have in the exchange rate now. But again, how do you drive that? How do you make people to have confidence in that system? That for me is a major, major challenge, because when people have confidence in the system that, okay, this is actually a system that have integrity, a system that is market driven, a system that is acceptable by everybody. Now, I keep saying the Nigerian challenge in terms of FX has nothing to do with the autonomous exchange market, willing buyer, willing seller. That space is stable. That space is liquid. That space it's liquid. Let me use that word. But the challenge has been in the retail end. And when we talk about those retail end, people say, who are in the retail end? The retail end is that small entrepreneur that need $1,000, 500, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, that wants to pay school fees for a student, that want to order goods from China, that wants to order goods from the UK. How soon does he get that fund, and how soon does that fund find its way into the hands of into the sellers of whatever it is? That has been the challenge with Nigeria. And that's why you see this volatility. The volatility is as a result of low liquidity in the retail and end of the Nigerian exchange market.
All right. Now, when you talk about foreign exchange intervention, at what point will this not be misconceived to amount to political interference? And then, what will be the impact for open economies where uh, the entities are vulnerable to shocks and disruptions? What will be the impact of foreign exchange intervention on that kind of economy?
I like giving an example. When we had the challenge in 2008, when the world had a global economic crisis at that time, and President Obasanjo was the president of Nigeria at that time. And the exchange rate at that time was even about things 160 naira and to the dollar. And what was done then was so simple. We have a reserve, we have a very robust reserve, about 100 billion. And so that was able to maintain stability. So uh, because during what developed economies like Nigeria over the year, what Nigeria has failed to do is to build this reserve for external shocks. External shock like if you look at the challenge that we are facing as a nation as regard FX, started immediately we have the COVID-19 pandemic. And so the global economic destruction, as we couldn't recover from it fast, and then we had to go into recession again, then Russia and Ukraine crisis and that and that. So all these were destruction beyond our own control. So how do you intervene to make sure you maintain stability? The first thing is during a good time, how much of your reserve, how much war chest, I like calling it war chest, do you have in your reserve in terms of dollar liquidity? So if you look at countries like India, if you look at countries like China, you look at countries like Brazil, you look at countries like South Korea, realize that their exchange rate is quite stable. And because of the kind of reserve they have, India, for instance, have about $700 billion in foreign reserve. So when you have such a reserve, then you are not afraid of external shocks to distort your market. Then you are able to intervene and to intervene at the right time. So intervention in itself is not bad, but where like you say, when do you normally intervene? When you normally intervene is when you see that there's destruction of your currency, and you think that your currency is grossly, I use that word grossly, on the value. How did that, if you, like I said, I like example, come back to Nigeria. Initially, when we have those challenges of the Naira exchange going to 1,000, 1,200, 1,400, 1,500, immediately it got to 1,900, and people begin to say, some economists say that it's going to get to 5,000. The CBN had no choice but to intervene to bring it to about 1,300. And after that, there were the global bodies like JB Morgan, Bank of America, that said, look, the true value of the exchange rate for Nigeria is about 1,000, 1,000 or 1,000. Even the Nigerian government, through the tax reform committee, was saying that they think that the true value of the Naira is about 750 to 800. So those are times that you try to intervene. But like I keep saying, no economy leave its currency for market forces, because market forces are there to take advantage, and they will bastardize your economy when they have an advantage, because they are playing to make sure that they make profit out of every policy that you come to. So you have to safeguard your currency from market forces. And that's when you think your currency is grossly undervalued, then you need to intervene.
That there is the challenge of illiquidity, not enough forex, and even the Bureau de Change operators are complaining as much as the banks too are complaining of forex scarcity. But the Central Bank of Nigeria has done some interventions. Though looking at the situation, it doesn't look like the interventions can be sustainable. Now, in this kind of challenge, what would you recommend that the CBN do?
Blessing, you must commend the CBN. At least they're doing some things, even if it comes late. First of all, who took us to where we are? It was the CBN also that brought Nigeria's currency to its knees, because I think they made a tactical blunder by moving the currency at a point from 960 to synergize with the parallel market at 1,400 at that time. I think that was the game changer, and that did not really help the market. Now, we're talking about what their intervention has done. Yes, their intervention, if you look at it, has brought a little bit of stability to the market, but maybe not like everybody expected them to have. And the challenge is that they don't seem to have enough to intervene in the market. But like I said, that they seems to be trying to press the right button. One, I have to talk about the recent domestic dollar bond that were issued through the help of a prudential registrar. I mean, United Capital. You saw how that it was oversubscribed because at 8% is one of the highest you can get in terms of value using the dollar. Those are what happened then. You were for you to maintain stability, for you to attract more FX into your economy, you have to look at products. Aside, because when you look at Nigeria, how do we earn FX? We earn FX through crude oil sales. That's basically where we earn FX from. Then also we earn FX from Nigeria and the diaspora, how they bring in FX into the economy. So when you look at that two side, so through the sale of crude oil and also in Nigeria and the diaspora, you realize that when they send the side of crude oil, we've had this oil theft, we've not been able to up our production quota, we've not been able to earn FX. Then in the side of Nigeria in diaspora, you have seen that comparable to what they did sometime in 2019, the remittance from Nigeria from diaspora was even it was higher than what we made in crude oil, that we're able to maintain stability. So what we need to do as a nation is to come up with products that will attract long-term investment, especially from foreign direct investors and Nigerians in the diaspora. Today, India maintains stability in their currency by depending largely on their diaspora space. The Indians in the diaspora, they seem to be the one that maintains stability in those spaces because the government tend to make the bring in products that makes those Indians outside the shore of their country want to invest in their country, and also create avenue, trade policy that they could also use to attract direct investors, even from Indians in the diaspora. So those are type of things that you can do to create stability. You create a market, and once you create a market and the goods is available, the goods is nice, everybody want to come to the market to buy. So what Nigerians should be doing, like there was time that the CBN was thinking of having what they call the diaspora fund, the diaspora bond that will be invested in critical sector of Nigerian economy, like infrastructure, like also real estate. So they were looking at how they could, or they were thinking of a time, they would say they would call it a diaspora village that would be also give them land for them to bring in FS, build their own monitors, and make sure that these remittance that comes in are utilized to their advantage. So those are things that we should continue to push the narrative towards bringing a product that create value for them, not just them sending money to their relative that are here, and the relative that are here collect those money and looking for where they can get more value for it in terms of exchange rate. So they go to the bureau exchange, and then they try to manipulate the rate so that it will suit them. But when you give them a product and that product is good, everybody will be scrambling to invest in that product. You will earn more FX. Then once there's a market, and that market is, you create a market that is liquid, you create a market that is continuous, a lot of people want to participate in that market. So I think for Nigeria, what we need to do is to create a product that will attract Nigeria in the diaspora and also attract foreign direct investors. I'm saying foreign direct investors, I'm not using portfolio investors, because portfolio investors are in here for the short term, and sometimes they are the ones that cause the destruction in the market, especially the FX destruction. Because once there is a challenge in your market, 90% of them want to exit your market, and then that put more pressure on your currency because they want to exit the market with dollar. And once you don't have that dollar, then you see that gap begin to happen between the dollar and the naira.
All right, I would like us to do a spotlight on the FS system in Nigeria. You're aware that a few months ago, the CBN decided to float the naira, leaving it for market forces to determine the exchange rate. I'd like you to do an assessment of this. How successful it has been? Will you say it has achieved the purpose intended? And what do you think is actually wrong with this template? Because you said it earlier, that leaving it to market forces, it's a global practice. But here in Nigeria, you still have the fluctuations in the exchange rate. What actually went wrong with this policy, and what can be done to ensure that it achieves the purpose intended?
What went wrong with that policy was not well conceived. It was a policy that was driven by whether by the World Bank or by the IMF or by the I don't know, because it was not well conceived. When you want to float your currency, the first thing you need to do, you need to ask yourself, do you have the liquidity to maintain the stability of your currency? Liquidity in this sense is not just in the means of intervention, it's even having people believe in your economy and want to invest in your economy, bringing the FX so that you can create that liquidity in the market, because FX floating markets work by demand and supply. That's how FX market works. It works by demand and supply, demand and supply. So once demand is very high and supply is low, definitely it's causing a lot of destruction. I think that is the major problem that has affected this policy. There was not a clear-cut, consistent means on how they can get this policy on stage using the demand and supply side. I think they got it wrong. I keep saying it then that the challenge with the Naira was not in terms of the difference between the parallel and the FX market, but was all boiled down to liquidity. How much of liquidity did we have? At the time this administration came to power, the foreign reserve was about $28 billion, which could barely sustain 6 months of imported goods. And so that, for me, was the main challenge. So before you would have come out with this policy, you would have tried to see how you can maintain liquidity in the market, you can attract liquidity in the market. And then if you've been driven by World Bank or IMF, then you need to ask them what they are bringing to the table. I keep saying that that's where we got it wrong. This same floating system happened in Egypt. And today, Egypt exchange rate is very stable. But what did the Egyptians do? They realized that, look, our main means of revenue is tourism. And at that time, because of the challenge of COVID-19, security challenge, a lot of people were not ready to come in. And so they were not earning so much FX. So you were at that time telling them to reform their FX market from a control market to a fixed market. And they said, you know what, we want to do that, but what are you bringing to the table to implement this policy? Then the World Bank and they came together and decided that they were going to inject about $8 billion into the Egyptian economy. And that was the game changer. So immediately that liquidity came in, they floated the currency. On that first day, the currency lost about 50%. But the following day, you saw a recovery, and today that currency is very stable. So as that was the main challenge, we didn't have the liquidity, but we're in such a haste to do that, forgetting that our economy is actually an imported-driven economy, because virtually everything we consume, even when those things are produced here, the machineries are imported. And then we had the challenge of doing two major policies at the same time. And that was what really brought the economy to its knees. You do the exchange rate floating at the same time, and you also decided to remove subsidy without making room for local production. And once you remove subsidy, knowing fully well that imported refined petroleum products also depend so much on FX, and they are the key demand when it comes to the FX market. So that puts so much pressure on the Naira. And then the dollar was not available. So you saw that gap begin, and that's where we are. So what would they have done differently was to make sure you have the liquidity, then you float the currency. And then before you float the currency, every country should know what the true value of your currency is. We didn't know what the true value of our currency is, because if we know what the true value of our currency is via the dollar, we would not have moved from 960 to 1,400 when we ourselves say that the exchange rate at a point, the CBN said, should be going between 800 to 750. And here we were moving our own to 1,500 to create, to say that you want to create, you don't want that gap. You want to maintain a stable exchange rate, but uniform exchange rate. That was I think that was a big mistake, because this was the first time that we're seeing that the official market was meeting to catch up with the parallel market. Ordinary is always the other way around, when the parallel market seems to move towards having stability with the official market. So I think that was where the problem is. That was where the problem is, and that's where the problem has been. So, but to really solve that problem is just only one thing we need: attract liquidity, attract liquidity. Like I said, attract liquidity in two ways. You either attract liquidity, high liquidity through the sale of crude oil. Unfortunately, that also has its challenge. You know what that challenge is: oil theft. We've not been able to make sure we export a lot of crude oil outside the shore of this country. And then secondly, Nigeria, the diaspora, we need to come up with a product, and we need to also make sure that those international money agents also make remittance here in Nigeria, rather than a lot of apps coming, which is technology driven, whereby people just do their remittance online, and that they only receive naira here, and that dollar does not come into the Nigerian economy. So those are part of the strategy that the CBN need to be thinking about, and that's why I said that bringing that digital platform is very, very good for the economy.
Now, the BRICS plan on launching their own payment system. When that payment system, which is going to run on blockchain, is launched, would it have any impact on the global forex markets for a country like Nigeria, where we are import dependent, and the dollar, the economy is so much dollarized? What impact will it have on the current issue of forex scarcity in Nigeria?
Okay, people keep talking about BRICS, I mean, coming up with their own currency. And the question I normally ask of these nations, the BRICS nation that we're talking about, how many of them have their currency in US dollars? 90%, I mean, practically all of them, not even 90%, all of them have their reserve in the US dollar. So are they going to also make sure that they stop having reserve in the US dollar, flood the market with the US dollars to bring the US dollars to their knees? Definitely, I don't think so. And secondly, you look, when you're talking about that, how much volume of trade do you do within yourself? That is the major challenge. So if you are coming up with a policy and the volume of trade between yourselves are very low, that policy will not still see the light of day. And that is why the African Continental Free Trade Agreement has been in the limbo, because what has happened? Africans don't do more trading within themselves. They do more trading with China, with the United States, with the United Kingdom, and other developing economies than doing trading within themselves. So if you're a BRICS nation and then you come up with currency, you say, okay, this is the currency. What will determine the stability, what will determine the workability of that currency is how much trade do you do within yourself. Just like when the euro came up with the euro as a global means of exchange, as a means of, so you could see that they do a lot of business within themselves, whether through transportation, through road network, through infrastructure, through technology. A lot of things they interwove within themselves. So there was a lot of trade going in. Then you can think of that. Africa have not been able to maintain the single currency because of barrier in the Anglophone or the Francophone challenge, and also, but basically that is there. But I think the main challenge has to do with the volume of trade within yourself. So I don't think this BRICS nation thing is going to really, really work if a lot of those countries still depends on doing more trade with the United States than any other country. And that's why the United States does not think are not shivering or are not worried about this BRICS issue, because for that to succeed, there must be a volume of trade within yourselves. And that for me is not going to happen. So when you look at that by and by of Nigeria, then you realize you get to understand what I'm saying. How much of trade do we do with some of these nations that are BRICS nations? How much of trade do we do with the United Kingdom, with the United States? So those are part of the things that you look at. So I'm not so much excited about it. And even if it's a good policy, but I think some of those policies to work, first of all, there must be trade within yourself.
Interesting. Now, I would love us to discuss how, FX intervention can be used to manage inflation expectations. There's something IMF said in this regard. Let me read it to you, and I would love you to take a listen and react to it. Now, foreign exchange intervention, when combined with raising interest rates, can help contain the impacts of inflation and reduce the adverse effects of economic growth. The raising of interest rates can help contain the impacts of inflation. That is how to deploy foreign exchange intervention to managing inflation expectations. Would you say this is achievable looking at the case study here in Nigeria?
That's not achievable, and that's why I said we should look for an homegrown solution. That's what I call the textbook economy. It doesn't really work. It works there when you talk about distortion, and that distortion has to do with maybe internal distortion, maybe distortion that has to do with one issues or the other, maybe trade issues, trade volume, or but when it has to do with interest rate, and it is when you have to know that if you hike interest rate, especially what is happening in Nigeria now, by hiking of interest rate, you've seen the effect in small businesses. That means the cost of doing business have gone high, and some of these small businesses are still struggling with a lot of issues that have to do with infrastructure, that has to do with power. So you are killing that sector by hiking interest rate. And then you need to look at the banks also. When you look at the bank half-year report, you realize that most of the bank impairment charges have gone up because of the hike in interest rate, and some of these companies are not able to pay. So I don't think that has worked in Nigeria, and I don't think that will work in any country that is import dependent. Because what it does is that you are killing your local economy. So what the IMF is saying is what the CBN have been doing, and that's why a lot of us were not happy with the last CBN Monetary Policy Committee meeting where there was hiking rate. But what they are looking at, they are thinking of attracting more foreign investment into your country through treasury bill, bonds, fixed income space, or the equity market, rather than growing your own local economy. So it is now more expensive is to borrow money. So that has not worked in Nigeria, and I don't think that is the solution. For Nigeria's own case, why inflation is exchange rate have a very high impact on inflation is just because most of what we eat, we import. So once the rate goes up, then we don't have any option than for the price of these goods to go up. So that has been the challenge. And that's why we are saying that the policy that Mr. President said they wanted to do, the policy of making sure that they remove tariff totally from household items could have been the game changer, because that would drive down price of those goods. And then that will help cope inflation. So for me, I think the IMF policy is a textbook policy that works in the real sense. But in Nigeria, it will not work, because when you hike interest rate, you reduce liquidity in the sector, you are killing the most vibrant sector of the Nigerian economy, which is the SME sector. And that sector thrives on liquidity. That sector thrives on medium of exchange, is always cash driven. So by the time you begin to starve that sector of cash, then you are killing that sector. All you need to look to know what I'm saying is that look at the currency redenomination that happened during the last CBN management high, that it killed the informal sector, and they are still coping to be back on their feet. So most of this policy doesn't work. But where those policy work is when all the parameters in your economy is stable. But once there's instability in your economy, you need to look for an own solution to that challenge by looking at how can you improve a critical sector of your economy, either the sector that brings you effects or the sectors that deals with your citizens. Those are the things that you need to look at, not necessarily hiking rate to drive down inflation. We started hiking rate the same time with the United States, with the United Kingdom. Today, their rate has come down to about 4 to 3%, but we are still in 32%. So that tells you that every economy have to look for the middle ground between their own economic solution by a textbook economic solution.
Okay, let me take you back now to the policy of the CBN to automate forex trading in Nigeria beginning from December this year. So when we had an interview with someone who's from the Association of Bureau de Change Operators, now he spoke about some concerns, training of Bureau de Change Operators, equipping of the operators for this transition. What's your take on this? What should be the approach, even though the CBN has said there will be a 2-week test in December?
I think by now the CBN should be synergizing with the Bureau de Change. Like I said, that is the retail space of the market, unless the CBN is going to create the retail market outside of the Bureau de Change using this the automatic system. Otherwise, it will not see the light of day. So I think the CBN should still, that 2 weeks should not just be for the bank alone and the CBN. It should involve the bureau de change. That will be the game changer. If they don't involve the bureau de change, I don't think we'll have this kind of success that we should be expecting. My challenge is the bureau de change to how prepared that they are, because it's only in Nigeria you go on the road, you see somebody telling you exchange rate, exchange rate. You go in developed countries, you go in some countries, even in Ghana, here, you move into a particular space, you sit down like an office, like a bank, and then you do your exchange rate and go. And I keep asking, why has it been very difficult for the CBN to create like a bureau de change like what is obtainable in other banks globally, whereby I come into the bank and go to the bureau de change, I look at what the exchange rate is, I change and I move out. Why are we not involving the bank? And this bank have a lot of offshore liquidity. So that for me is a major challenge. But maybe with this automation of this of the FX market, we may attract the banks to be part of it, and then the bureau de change also part of it. That will create competition, that will bring in liquidity, and that will drive down rate. And like I said, once rate comes down, inflation is on its way down.
All right. We've talked about the impact of foreign exchange intervention. I also want us to look at the other side to it, which, there are two sides to a coin. Now, what are the risks involved when you talk about intervention, monetary intervention? What are the risks involved? And then will it not bring what you call complacency, where the economy is open to more vulnerabilities? At what point will it be necessary to stop FX intervention?
At what point to stop FX intervention is it's a very easy thing to do. One, when your reserve is buoyant, and then two, when you know that your rate is stable. And when it means that your reserve is buoyant, it has to do that you have enough of liquidity, and also you have been able to attract a lot of liquidity, and then your reserve is also, your exchange is also very, very stable. And also that is the true value of your rate. And that's, for me, is just the key. That's not the answer to the question that you just drawn out.
Many thanks, Muktar Mohammed, the CEO of Finance with Muktar, for being on the Air Exchange this morning. You've made brilliant submissions, recommendation, and analyzed the issue with Forex intervention.
Thank you, Blessing.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.